So I was watching TV the other night and saw this project by Upcycled by Bree and immediately shot her a message saying, "Girl, I am stealing this project." And the next day I came in and asked my husband to cut out some circles. We leave for market next Tuesday, and so I don't have time to do everything myself. To get a nice dark base on these, I am using DIY paint, dark and decrepit, and that's going to be a beautiful base stain for my next step. Okay, so we've got the circles for the top and the bottom, and now I've decided that the brown is perfectly fine, but it's not the look that I want because honestly, I think a lot of people do the brown and I want mine to stand out a little bit. And I do have some hardware that I haven't shown you yet on here. So I am going to use some of the Miss Mustard Seed in French Enamel. Go ahead and mix this up and then I'm going to show you a trick. If you've never done Miss Mustard Seeds before, it's really easy. So it's 1-to-1 ratio. So I'm going to use 2 scoops of the French Enamel. And then I have some warm water. Warm water isn't required, but in my opinion, it does make it easier. So I'm just going to add 2 scoops of warm water because I added 2 scoops of powder. And then I'm going to mix it up. If you're mixing a lot, I highly suggest an immersion blender, like if you're painting a large piece of furniture. But since I'm just doing some smalls, this little plastic fork will be just fine. And I'm going to give it a decent mix, and then I'm going to let it sit for a few minutes because the powder will absorb the water while it's sitting. Then we'll come back and mix it again, and it should be all absorbed. So while that paint is absorbing the water, I am going to break out my DIY clear wax. I am going to go ahead and I'm going to take this and I'm going to rim this cloche with my wax. So milk paint is interesting because, and one of my favorite features is that it more or less does what it wants to do. You don't get a lot of control over it, but there are things that you can do to help get it chippy. If you make your paint a little bit thicker, it is more likely to crack and chip, which would mean a little more powder, a little less water. You control the ratio. And then the other is to add a medium that will cause it to not stick. And in this case, that medium is going to be wax. So I've applied wax lightly to my rim, fairly heavily, and I am going to put this down on this wood where it might normally be if this were used over time. And I am just going to sort of rub a circle where that is. And you can kind of see it in some places. If you don't think that you got enough, then you can always take a paintbrush and go over those spots a little more heavily. And you don't want to wipe this off. You want to let this sit. And I don't want to do the whole thing. I just want to do some of the areas of it. And where we're doing this, the paint should resist. It doesn't mean it will 100% resist, but there should, generally speaking, be an area that the paint will not stick to because the wax is in the way. Now I have my Perfectionist brush by DIY Paint, and I'm really choosing that one because it's got a nice long handle, so I won't have to stick my fingers in the paint, and I have little ridges in my cup, and that will help me get in there. We're painting a circle, so the type of paintbrush is relatively irrelevant except for getting it out of here. So now I want to go ahead, and I actually like to paint the sides first. We're just going to go ahead and paint normal. One of the nice things about using Miss Mustard Seed is I rarely need a second coat. And if you need it to adhere to a surface, then you will need a primer or you'll need to add some bonding agent. Because new wood is porous, it tends to, if you have raw wood, and yes, we did a stain on it, it tends to absorb most of the paint and not get super chippy, maybe a little cracky. But I'm hoping because I used the DIY patina that has a built-in top coat that it will give us a little bit more chipping and cracking. I don't want this to be super chippy, or I would have added more wax throughout. But the other thing that helps is if you speed up the process by using a heat gun. So we're going to do that. So I do see a little bit of action right here where it's starting to chip and crack on this block. Most of the rest of it doesn't have much, but you can see where that resist is. So I'm not quite happy with the results. And so I'm going to make it a little bit thicker to give it a little more surface to be cracking and chipping, which means giving this another little mix. I'll just do this with the tip of my brush and adding another coat. The more paint, the thicker your paint, the more likely you are to get a nice chippy result. You can see on this small one, we are getting much more cracking and chipping. We're getting right where I want it to be. And on this larger one, which is a base, we're starting to see it around the rims. Okay, so I've let these dry for a while. They look streaky now. What you're seeing here is some of the sap that was in the wood coming through. You can even see it really clearly right there. So it's creating a glossy finish, but once we're done, you won't notice that. We don't have a ton of chipping. I would say that we have more cracking than chipping. But on these larger ones where we put the wax on the cloche, you can see we're getting a nice wax ring. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to take some 220 grit sandpaper and I'm going to give everything a nice light sand. So I have 4 more boards for my second set, and I'm going to do these the same way, but this time I am going to do boxwood. To seal these up, I'm going to go back to my clear wax. I'm going to use one of my JRV stencil brushes. I love these brushes for waxing. The nice firm tip of them is great when you're doing smalls. So I almost always wax with a stencil brush. I just have one for clear and one for the dark wax, and then often I'll use my white with the clear. But Miss Mustard Seed, sort of like when you're using DIY paint, is going to be much darker when you apply it, and then it will lighten up as it dries. One of my favorite things about using Miss Mustard Seed is that you get, or any kind of milk paint really, is that you get all this delicious texture in it, which comes because the minerals sort of separate. I'm just looking for my rag so I can wipe it off. The minerals sort of separate in the paint. I don't know how well you can see that, but it actually creates a myriad of colors, and you get that perfectly aged look that is hard to recreate with any other kind of paint. I have bought this hardware to go on top of these, so they'll go like this. And then I also picked these up for $2. I have these, and these are going to go on the green one because this jar is a little more simple. So I think the finial will be really nice. But I'm liking how this goes with the French, very French country. So I just simply centered this on my 2 round top pieces and then put a dot. I used the back of my paintbrush because it was long and I didn't think I'd get a pencil tip through there. So I just dipped it in leftover paint and dopped right in there. I'm gonna let this dry for a second so I don't smear it. Then I am going to go drill holes the same diameter as my screw here. I absolutely love how these came out, and I can honestly say without watching Upcycled by Bree, I would never have thought of turning these ordinary sconces into cloches. And one of my favorite things about them is actually adding the wax. By adding that wax rim and getting the chippiness on the base, they look a lot older than a few minutes old. Let me know what you thought about this video and if you also watch Bree. And here's a quick reminder that you can follow us on all social media at Vintage Bee Design, and we have a community in Facebook called Creating the Hive or Creative Con Vintage Bee. And I have just started a new coaching group. Membership is only $20 a month. Links are in the description below. Let's get back to crafting. Some of you might remember about a year ago, I posted a project using this bedpost spindle. Well, we had a few pieces left over and I gave them to my husband and asked him to turn some wooden ornaments for me. So here's a little peek at his process. If you enjoy watching this process, you might want to check out his channel on YouTube at Wood Turning with John, or on Instagram at John Morrow II. We found another bedpost that was similar, and he did these for me as well. So we have white ones and cream ones available. I'll have links in the description below for these if you're interested in purchasing them. We only have 25 between both of them, so it is limited quantities. Basically, I'm using DIY and clear wax to richen up these and make them really even more stunning than they already are. Then I am going to add some red ribbon to the white ones and cream ribbon to the cream ones. What I'm really trying to show you here with the ribbon is that it's much easier and more efficient if you get something the right length and you wrap it around, then you can cut it all at once. This is much more efficient time-wise than measuring and cutting each length individually. I simply can't believe how beautiful these came out, and each one is individually turned by my husband and unique. So I hope you love them as much as I do. Please be sure to give him a big shout out in the comments below. So I got this screen from that customer that gave us so much stuff, and I thought that I could make it over for market and it would be good for jewelry. I believe things will stick in it. Of course, one of the problems is one of the legs is broken. So, and I don't have the other piece to glue it back together. So I'm going to start by taking off this leg and this leg, and I'm going to trace out this leg on another piece of wood and make a copy of it for this side. I ended up tracing this actually out twice because there were some issues with the remaining leg and some of the screws broke in the piece. So I decided it was just easier to go ahead and make two brand new legs. I know I had my husband cut the circles out at the beginning, but he's not here, and so I'm left to my own devices. I want to get this done today because one, I have this video due, and two, I want to take this piece to market and we leave on Tuesday. So I decided to use the bandsaw, which seems a lot easier to me than using the handheld saws. It just is a lot smoother and faster. And for the money, it is a definite must-have in your workshop. Because I'm using really cheap plywood that was left over in the warehouse on this, I am going to go ahead and start off sanding this with 80 grit sandpaper. I'm rounding off the edges as I go, and then once that is done, I will switch to 220 grit sandpaper and we'll be able to take paint to it. Okay, I've got new feet on. I ended up doing both feet brand new, and now I've mixed up some Artesimo, and that is Miss Mustard Seeds milk paint. Looks like it's a milk paint kind of day. And the reason that I've decided to do that is because of this burlap. And it does look like it's raising in a few places, and hopefully that won't be too big of an issue. When it really comes down to an issue, I'll fix it, but I'm not trying to sell this. I'm gonna use this for jewelry display. Because this is so dark and it's very dingy, I decided to use a dark color versus a light color. We'll see how that goes. Since milk paint has such a high concentration of water, being mixed straight from water, I thought this would be the perfect solution to manage the fabric. And I really love this Artesimo color. It's super on trend for what we're seeing in these rich colors. It is super annoying when you think you've taken a video and find out you got exactly 0 seconds of it. So I used the new Finnabar Stencil Art Deco wall for the 2 outer panels, and then I'm going to give them a good sanding. And honestly, this project came out way prettier than I expected it to. I thought this would be a perfunctory, usable piece for our display, and now I am second guessing that decision. This may actually end up for sale. I think it's a beautiful. Thank you so much for watching today's video. If you love content like this, be sure to hit like, subscribe, and share with a friend. And a big shout out to my husband, John, who helped so much with these.